This video is sponsored by Wing Technology, your ultimate flight sim hardware solution.
Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing very well, and you get to welcome back possibly the coolest guy in the world. We've got Ate! Hello Ate, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm fine. How are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. We did an initial first part of the video, but because as soon as a fighter pilot starts talking, it can take a long time because it's got lots to say. And we did our hour, and now we're cracking on. We're going to start with question 16. Anything before we crack on with the questions, Ate?
Nothing. No.
Beautiful. So, question 16. What is the feeling after you come out of a dogfight or a mock dogfight and you were pulling high Gs for a while? Are you tired? Are you drained? Are you pumped? Do you have adrenaline? And what else do you feel? Can you explain for us, lot who have never been able to ride in a jet fighter?
It depends. Honestly, it really depends on the length of the flight and the number of scenarios you flew. Usually when you fly red air, like a 1v2, it's pretty fun. You're really pumped. And it also depends on if the mission was like an exercise where you were graded, like when you're pilot in training in a squadron, or when you're not division leader, usually you feel more tired or drained, and it's easier to enjoy yourself when you're instructor flying the aircraft because you have less pressure. So you usually find yourself to be more tired and drained as a student and more pumped as an instructor, unless you have been working a lot with a lot of crews back to back, not a lot of time off, and you're just plain tired all the time, which does happen, at least in the French Navy.
Roger, I've heard that people say before that the same human on different days can have different G tolerances for the reasons of physiology. You felt that as well?
Sure. I mean, it's just like sports. So when you work out, depending on what you did the day before, depending on your level of rest, and it does change every day. It's going to be a bit different depending on the time of the day as well, depending on if you had lunch, not lunch, what you had for lunch, all that stuff. It's just like a workout. So it's going to make some small differences, not really during the combat because you should do your best anyway, but more afterwards once the adrenaline comes back down a little bit. And also what's going to impact the way you feel afterwards is the workload you have after. Let's say you're an instructor, you just flew your flight, you land, now you have to debrief pretty fast and do your paperwork, or your scheduling stuff, and then you fly again in the afternoon. You're going to stay pretty alert. If you're done for the week, you're done with all your paperwork or your stuff, you have nothing to do in terms of management, then usually you might feel more drained. It just, I guess, like any other job, really depends on the pressure you have and the workload you're facing.
Roger. Okay, fine. Question 17. How do you, in your aircraft, utilize the benefits of your delta wing in order to gain advantage over an opponent? Presumably the opponent is a non-delta wing in this question.
I would say maybe transitioning from 2 circle to 1 circle, you can really stop the aircraft with a delta. So that might be an advantage. Other than that, with a delta, we can really sit on the engine and the wing. So I think 1 circle is pretty nice with a delta wing, and transitioning from 2 to 1 can really be dangerous for a non-delta wing against a delta wing. So it really depends on a lot of stuff. But usually being able to stop like this in the air is pretty cool with a delta.
Roger. Now, obviously you've had some dogfights in our simulator. Do you think that transfers through to the Mirage 2000 Delta?
Yeah,
I think it does, and that's why I asked it. Yeah, because you just pull that alpha and the thing just stops in dead air.
Yeah, absolutely. But the issue is, it is easier, I think, to regain energy in real life because you feel it more. In DCS, you don't really feel the amount of G's and pressure you're asking on the aircraft. You don't feel, because it's shaking. In real life, it's going to start shaking. So you're going to have more feedback from the aircraft, and it's going to be easier not to deplete too much energy. I find that the Mirage 2000 in DCS, you tend to lose extremely fast your energy, and then it's pretty tough to regain energy afterwards. You really have to push on the stick. You really have to wait. In real life, you usually maintain more energy.
Roger. Interesting. Okay. engines. What engine is in the Rafale, and is it responsive and adequate for the airframe's operation?
Yeah, M88 from Safran, 7.5 tons per engine of thrust with the afterburner on. Pretty good engines. They could bump them to 9 tons easily. It comes with a price. It's never enough. I mean, when you're flying at 13.5 gross weight, it's pretty cool. When you're at 24 tons with a lot of bombs in the desert with high temperatures, it's never enough. So it really depends on the type of aircraft you're flying. Type being, are you equipped air to ground? Do you have like 3 external fuel tanks and 6 bombs plus missiles, or are you about to take off for a display flight? I mean, usually fighter pilots were never happy with the engines anyway. We always want more thrust. It's sort of a joke, but Rafale, it's more than decent. It just you have to be aware that depending on what you put below the wings, the aircraft behavior changes a lot.
Roger. Was the power to weight ratio a big step up from the Super Attendard, which I don't really know anything about?
Yeah, I mean, Super E doesn't even have afterburners. So.
Oh, really? Ooh. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Very good. Right, next. Was there a guy you had to go against, I'm guessing this isn't a dogfight, that was really good and that you will particularly remember? So I think it's talking about the pilot rather than the aircraft here in a one-on-one or something like that.
Usually, pretty fast. I mean, the U.S. Navy exchange officer was a good dogfighter. Usually, recalls are very bad guys. But the U.S. Navy exchange pilot was a good dogfighter. Was a very good dogfighter. It was very pleasant to fly with him. Other than that, that's it. I'll say the U.S. Navy exchange pilots we had on the Rafale.
Roger. Okay. Now we're talking about launches from the carrier. Is the procedure of shooting off of the deck in the French Navy different to that than seen in the US, for instance, Hornet? If so, what are the obvious differences?
Not really different. Pretty similar. No, it's almost the same. You're going to use a launch bar. It's coming from the nose gear, and the orders are pretty much the same. You might have some slightly variations, maybe on the takeoff procedure afterwards, stuff like that, doing a turn and doing a turn. It's almost the same. With the Super 8 was a bit different because you had to use a cable to get catch shots, so it was a bit different, but you can. It's virtually the same.
Roger. My understanding is with the US carriers, they will the speed the catapults will shoot you at will depend on your aircraft weight. Is that the same for you guys?
Absolutely, it's physics. So depending on the outside air, on the pressure, on the temperature, on the speed of the boat, on your gross weight, on tons of stuff, we're going to compute a different end of catapult speed, and traction you're going to get from the catapult is going to be different.
Roger. If there is such thing, is there a typical or average takeoff speed, if you're even allowed to say it, off of a carrier?
It really depends on where you want to look at the speed, because your speed increases so fast, it's almost virtually impossible to say exactly what speed you have at what point.
Right.
So check at the end of the catapult, but it's insane how fast it rises. So it depends on the weight and everything, but 135 to 160-ish is usually what you're going to get at the end of the catapult.
Roger. So it's not like an airfield takeoff where you can see the knots rising slowly and you've got your rotate speed.
It is. Well, you want to check, and you do check that you have above a given speed, and if you can check that, it's great. And then let's say on the Rafale, you have some specific symbology in the HUD to make sure you have enough acceleration. So there are a couple stuff that comes into play.
Regards exactly what we're talking about, have you ever had any emergencies, an engine go out or something on a launch?
No. Pretty... Oh, on the Super E, I had the altimeters that came out.
No. So it told you you're at 10,000 feet. Oh, it came out!
It came out of the bucket. It moved back, like it's screwed with bolts, and the bolt wasn't very well screwed. So as we were accelerating, I had to put my hand on to keep it inside, and then it didn't fall off, which is great. But yeah, that was pretty funny.
It just shows you the forces that are in play there. That's amazing. Right, very good. What other planes have you flown other than the Raphael that were different? Anything other than the Super E that you've flown?
Super E, I've been in Alpha Jet, T-45, 2000, and that fast jet. That's it. I don't know, maybe I can't recall. Maybe yeah. No. Big difference is different generation of aircraft. So in terms of tactics, it's going to be very different because you don't have as much sensors. And what's really unique about the Rafale is the amount of sensors and data you get, and how well it's basically it's taken from all the sensors, and it's just all put together on one screen, and you have full situational awareness thanks to that screen. So that's pretty unique to the Rafale, and it's pretty cool.
Roger. I don't understand this next one, but maybe you can. How do you use the Canards in flight, or are they automatically deployed, and you cannot control them?
I think we have a second joystick, and I'm kidding. No, the Canards are part of the flight control, so you don't do anything specific with them. What you're doing with those type of flight control system you use in the Rafale is you give orders to a computer, and the computer decides how it's going to move all the flight control surfaces, and you really don't know which one is going to move. The only time you know for sure the Canards are going to move is when you pull out the air brakes below a given speed. Then the Canards move and put themselves in the air brake position. But above a given speed, they can't because it would be too much pressure. So I guess that's the only time you can really control the Canards is with the air brakes.
Roger. I've seen some planes come into land, and then the Canards or foreplanes, whatever you call them, get tilted up 90 degrees. Is that a thing for yours? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the air brake. It's landing mode. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Gotcha. Right. Okay. Startup time. What is the startup time of a Rafale from dark and cold, and do you need to wait for the jet to align prior to takeoff?
It's pretty fast. It's actually very fast, and you want to align, but there are several ways of aligning your system. So you could pre-align it. Let's say you're doing QRA, you're on alert, so you pre-align the system. It can go extremely fast. Rafale can be extremely fast to start. What usually takes the most time is checking the flight control system and doing the couple checks. But it is very easy to start and to get ready for takeoff, actually. And there are a lot of stuff you can do as you taxi, like starting the radar, all that type of stuff.
Roger. A bit of a brain teaser for you. I understand if you had a purely INS driven system with no satellite assistance, for instance Mirage 2000C of a certain variant, I understand you have to do an alignment for that. What I never understood is why a EGI system like a Raphael has to align. Why can't it rely on satellite inputs just for the first few miles to align it from the satellite? I never got that through my head. Isn't that the optimal way of doing things?
I guess because satellite is great, but it's not going to give you really the good vectors in all direction. What you need is to be able to have all those different vectors, vertical, moving forward, all those dimensions. And if you only have your position, you're missing information. So you're going to, with a GPS, you're going to know where you are. You're going to know your ground speed, but you're not going to be able to know your attitude, for example. So you need to have all those sensors to be able to tell if you're pitching up, pitching down, because GPS information aren't going to be sufficient to do that.
Right. So, yeah.
You really need more, like somewhere almost 6-degree information. It's just like a VR headset. The VR sensors, you can either just move your head like this, or you can really move in 6D. And it's a bit the same with all those sensors. Is if you only rely on GPS information, you're going to miss some dimensions. That's why you need to align.
Okay, that makes complete sense. Okay, lovely. Where are we? What is your view of DCS, and can it help young pilots to gain knowledge and learn routines, in your opinion?
Yes. Absolutely. I think DCS is great. I think you can go through all the basics and cockpit familiarization and comms and basic tactics and getting to know an area with DCS very efficiently. We used to chair flight, so you can sort of replace part of the chair flying with DCS for sure. Um, I think it's great. There are a couple of stuff we can discuss, like the G tolerance, but just like any simulators, there is several ways of using it, and I think if you use it in a smart way to work on knowing your systems, knowing how to put information in your system, all that stuff, it's awesome.
Roger. Yeah, I found it a lovely learning tool. I'm just a layman. I'm not, I was never a pilot or anything. I found it really good for learning general aviation. If you can't afford to go and get real proper lessons like me, I think it's a really useful tool. As a military person looking at a student coming through, I personally don't think they would, they probably want to detrain them and train them from scratch. But certainly as just a layman like me who wants to learn about aviation, I found it really useful.
As a military personnel, if you're trained correctly to use a system that is well replicated, makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all about doing the good procedure and doing the stuff how you're supposed to do them in the aircraft, and then getting proper training in the aircraft as well afterwards. Getting the familiarization in the aircraft, but it's eventually it's going to enable you to have more situation awareness in the aircraft because you're going to be more familiar with the instruments, more familiar with the checklist, more familiar with your environment, all that stuff. So that's good training.
Roger. Next is a fantasy question. So literally treat it like a fantasy question. What is your favourite jet of all time, or favourite aeroplane, I should say, of all time, and why? We ask everyone.
Favorite aircraft? I really like the F-22. I think the F-22 is very, very cool.
Any reason for that?
Cool looking.
Yeah.
Powerful, air-to-air, cool name, Raptor, just like in Jurassic Park. I think it's a cool aircraft, and you can get based in Hawaii, which is awesome. Can you imagine flying F-22s in Hawaii? I think not sure life can get any better.
Roger. I'm getting used to talking to pilots and stuff now, but 2 years ago I went to Riat, which is a big show we have in England.
I was there.
Were you? Did you ever fly at Riat?
The ground was flight sim. Flight simulator.
I very, very possibly even saw you. How weird is that? But I didn't know who you were back then, so that's weird, isn't it? And I remember I stayed at a hotel. There's only one hotel left to book, and it was the expensive one, so Mum had to pay for it in the end. And it happened to be where the pilots were, and I went to check in, or I went to check in, or went to the bar. I can't remember either. And standing next to me was the F-22 display pilot, and he said Raptor pilot on his thing, and I really wanted to go and kind of act cool, but I just froze up like a dick and I didn't know what to say. And it's growing on me, that aircraft. I must admit I hate new things because I'm an idiot and I like old things, but the thing is, seeing it at Riot, as I'm sure you would agree, it's a real presence. And I love seeing Rafale, I love seeing Eurofighter, I love seeing Hornet, F-16 there, but nothing moves the air like a Raptor. It really is the most violent thing there, in terms of what it does, and shakes your bones and sets off car alarms, and that's quite a cool thing for me. So yeah. Anyway,
and the fact that they don't sell it is pretty nice, and also the super crew stuff. Like you can be in Iraq or in Syria, and Raptors aren't here, because they might be late, and you see them arriving at just like 50,000 feet, Mach 1.4. You're like, oh no, they won't be late after all. They just show up supersonic, high altitude. They slow down, they drop their bomb, and then they re-roll as combat patrol, and you're like, okay.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay.
Pretty cool stuff. Okay. Makes sense.
Right. Okay. Well, that's yours then. Next, is it the Rafale capable of ground attack roles, and what armament roughly can she carry?
Hand grenades. We open the cannon.
Old school.
Yes. All type. 250 kilograms bombs, 1,000 kilogram bomb, nuclear missile. Tactical missile like the Storm Shadow, air anti-ship missiles, the Exocet that the British like a lot. What else? GBU 12, so that would be laser guided bombs. SBUs, so SBUs would be either laser guided, GPS guided, or guided thanks to data that you put it, like satellite picture, stuff like that. And gun, 3 mic.
You really have got the whole lot, aren't you? I'm just looking at one of those kind of pictures where it shows the plane in the middle and all of the stuff it can carry around the outside. I can't see anything there. Is it ASRAM capable, or is it something you're not interested in?
No, we're not ASRAM capable. I like how you pronounce it. I pronounce it ASRAM.
All right. Yeah, I was just looking at the missiles. All right, very good. So that's that.
Or Mika. So Mika air-to-air. So we have Mika IR Fox 2.
Yeah.
They're actually pretty medium long range, and we have a Mika Fox 3, and that's it. Meteor now. We do have the MBDA Meteor.
Yeah, Roger. I see that. Yeah, cool. 30 mil cannon, did you say?
Yeah.
Is that the same cannon as on the other aircraft, or is it a unique cannon?
It's the same type of rounds almost, but it's a bit different. But it's the same.
Okay, very good.
1,250 rounds a minute ish.
Copy. Okay. One thing I noticed on the Mirage 2000 is the complete lack of ammo it carries. Is that a problem with you guys as well, or I found
125 rounds only?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm a big noob, but I find that so little compared to a big F-15 or something with 1,000 rounds.
But the difference is the size of the munition is the same. So 30 mic munition is going to be 21 centimeter long. It's going to be about 480 grams per bullet. So those bullets, they're they're going to get in, they're going to explode, they're going to light on some fire. So with one bullet, you can destroy an aircraft, actually.
Roger. And because we're carrying less ammo with that type of ammo, would a pilot typically be trained to use it differently, whereas an F-15 can spray and pray? Because it's so many bullets.
We're not into use the spray stuff. We try to aim before we shoot. You have to be careful, of course, but it's not. We have smaller aircraft, so with smaller aircraft, you're going to be able to carry less stuff. So I think it's part of having a smaller aircraft. You just can carry that much stuff. Let's have a look at how many rounds have been shot in the past, and we don't shoot that much. It's sort of sad, especially for air-to-ground. If you look at the 2000D for a while, had no air-to-ground guns. Just doesn't make sense to me.
Roger. Okay. Right, here we go. Out next is, what is your typical mission loadout? Well, there's no such thing, I'm sure you're going to say. And what is the minimum armament carried on air policing duties?
Typical mission loadout for Iraq is going to be usually 4 bombs, 2 or 3 fuel tanks, and maybe 2 air-to-air missiles. Not giving any secret out, you can see it on the pictures. But air policy, I won't be able to say. But secret stuff.
Roger. Right, we shan't push on that. Okay. Is the Rafale easy to operate, and is it helping the pilot with the mission load and situational awareness, I guess, compared to the old airframes?
It is easy to operate, yet it can be tricky because it's so easy. You can put your guard down a little bit, so you have to be careful. Why is it easy to operate? Because you're supposed to put your mental bandwidth and your energy on the tactical stuff. So it gives you tons of information. You can see with the new active antenna radars from very, very far away. So you're really saturated with tactical information, and you have to decide how to use them properly. That's your job. Flying the aircraft is not much of an issue.
Roger. The next one, I'm not sure how you're going to answer, but let's see what you say. What is the approach and landing speeds of the jet, and are there any tricks to land a Delta smooth and steady? I don't know how you're going to judge the weight, because it's going to depend on weight, isn't it?
Yeah. Sorry, another week. Yes. It's going to depend on the weight. Navy pilots, we fly an AOA, so we're always shooting for 16-degree AOA. So it's going to give us 125 to 155 knots-ish, depending on our weight. and there is not a such thing as a smooth and steady landing for a naval aviator. I don't know how to do a smooth landing.
That's the idea, isn't it? You got to drive it into the deck.
Yeah, but joke aside, you want to be careful with the delta because above 16-degree AOA, when you start pulling back on the stick to do your flare, the aircraft is not going to decelerate like a regular wing. It's going to really start slowing down extremely fast, and you want to be careful not to touch with the back of the aircraft with the engines, and it does happen from time to time, especially on the Mirage 2000, where they can eat the back of the engine on the ground.
Do you flare at all on naval landings, or is it purely on the airfield?
Yeah, I mean, you flare when you come back to the base. You fly it almost until touchdown, and most of the time you will flare a little bit. It depends on your weight. On the boat, you never flare.
Roger, thank you. How much fuel can you take on board, and is it an easy plane to air refuel?
4.7 tons internal fuel. You can go up to almost more than twice that with external tanks. Never had any issue refueling air to air. You have a specific mode. When you switch air to air, flight controls change a little bit. And refueling really depends on the outside conditions. So the aircraft, it's a stable platform. So what makes it tricky is you have to be extremely smooth with the stick because the stick doesn't move much. And even though the flight control are going to help you during the air-to-air phase because they're a bit less sensitive, it can still be tricky. So you really don't want to overcompensate on the stick and be too nervous. You want to be gentle.
Roger. Now the next question is about the gun. We've already talked about that, but I'm just wondering, out of interest, the gun sight on the HUD. The digital gun sight, I find the one on the Mirage 2000 horrendously difficult to use. Is it similar to that one, or is it a completely different setup?
It's very similar. Slightly different, but very similar.
Roger. I was just looking at it on pictures here, but yeah, okay. Rightio, where are we now? Can you explain a bit about the vortexes that the Delta creates, and what is their effect on the flight envelope?
I guess you have a lot of drag due to the delta when you start picking up AOA, and what it's going to do is it's going to help you slow down even faster. It's going to create more drag, and you're going to need more energy to put the delta back in a very efficient AOA. You might be careful following a delta as well with a wake turbulence. But other than that, I'm not going to go into an engineering class. But yeah, Delta has some specific stuff. Just remember, the higher the AOA, the more air displacement you're gonna mess up, and it's gonna be trickier. But nothing very specific. I mean, just you have a huge air brake above a given AOA, and it's gonna create all sort of weird aerodynamic stuff due to the size of and the shape of the aircraft.
Roger. I recently learned about the lurxes, as they're called, on the Hornet, that can generate that weird kind of horizontal vortex, which can aid lift. But I guess that's not as relevant to you.
I'm not. I mean, I'm not really an engineer, so it's not really something we talk about, to be honest.
Roger. Where did we get to? Did you ever had any serious emergencies in the air, and what was it? So this could be either aircraft. I think we did talk about it briefly last week, but I must admit I've forgotten. Is there anything to mention on that?
Engine regulation issues, hydraulic issues, landing gear issues, navigation system issues, fuel issues, wingman having hypoxia issues, wingman having bird collisions.
That's all of them, isn't it?
Yeah. Landing gear collapsing on landing. What else? ordnance issues, like ordnance not falling. That's pretty much it.
Roger. So basically, just about everything went wrong at one point or another. Well, it's got
Yeah,
2,500 hours or something, haven't you? So something you're going to see
yeah,
some.
it's typical. All military pilots had all that stuff. I mean, especially when you flew the legacy aircraft, you had tons of them.
Roger. Yeah, absolutely.
It's good training.
Yeah, it's going to happen. Okay, what is the most difficult thing you have to teach the new generation of pilots, and how are the youngsters learning fast jets now, different to the previous generation of pilots?
I think the most difficult step to teach is the spiral in dogfighting in DFM when you start, let's say, from high altitude and the two aircraft start going nose low, and you're at like maximum AOA, pulling on the aircraft extremely close, way inside the bubble of the other aircraft, and you just turn from like 45,000 feet to the deck to 5,000 feet. And you really have to teach them to be super aggressive, to deny any control zone placement, and turn really close. Very, very close. And I think it's pretty difficult because we're a single seat only in the Navy, and it's pretty scary and it feels weird. So I think those spiral are something hard to teach. Other than that, I think we really changed the way we interact with the new pilots. It used to be very distant, very autocratic, very humiliating at some honestly. And now we treat the new pilots less like brainless, stupid human beings, more like officers and future pilots and professional, which is great. But the beginning, when I showed up for the French Navy Super E training, you really felt like you were sort of the lowest form of human being possible as a transitioning pilot in the squadron. And I think that's over now, which is great.
Roger. Just the example of doing that, the diving spiral in a dogfight. So, are you teaching remotely from the other plane? Is that how that's working?
Now you're coaching him. So you're telling him put more aileron, pull more, and you really have to talk him through the stuff and help him. So you tell him what to do, basically, flying your jet at the same time.
Interesting. Right. Okay. Was it difficult to switch to civil aviation role, and did you have to adapt into the new role?
Oh, it's just like any new role. My dad, after a military career, did some BizJet and then 330 for a Corsair in France. So I always sort of had some situational awareness on what it was like. So it wasn't a cultural shock. I knew exactly where I was going. So I think it's made a big difference because I knew exactly what was expected from me. So I was able to show up aligned with what an airline pilot is supposed to be aligned with. And it is different, but just like any mission is different. And I've got absolutely no issue with being aligned with absolute safety and comfort and timing for my passengers. So it wasn't that difficult. It's a new mission.
Roger. Mission. Absolutely no barrel rolls.
No, I mean, it's a young man's sport anyway. So.
Roger. Back to Dolph.
I can quote Batman on that one, but you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
There it is.
But it is very true as a military personnel. So you don't have to die as a hero. You can just leave as a non-hero. Switch career. But I think if you stay too long in small communities, it's bad for your brain. It's bad for the community, and it's bad for continuous improvement. So in fine, as we say, it's bad for the taxpayer and for your country. So it's important to understand that there is a learning curve, and at some point you're going to reach a plateau. And once you reach that plateau, maybe you're better off as an organization, as a country, giving the position to somebody else that is still on booster mode. And that's how you grow as a naval aviation, how you grow as as a military, I think.
Roger. Very philosophical, and thank God it doesn't apply to DCS, because I plateaued about 5 years ago, and I've been steadily getting worse since then. So, right, very good. Dogfighting. Everyone wants to hear about this. In a simulated dogfight situation, are you using different tactics according to which jet or maybe which pilot you're fighting against? Do you teach new pilots how to find weak spots in specific jets, or is it more difficult to decide how to counter the guy against you?
Now we do adapt our tactics to the enemy. Usually during the intelligence briefing before the mission, we're going to discuss what type of threat we're expecting and how we're going to handle the threat. We're going to try to go 1 circle, 2 circle, high altitude, low altitude, what type of tactics we expect. And we always brief the most likely scenarios, the worst case scenario, and the no enemy scenario. So that's something we're going to discuss for sure. And depending on our, because we're omni-role, depending on our weapon load and how we're equipped, air to ground, air to surface, air to air, it's also going to affect our tactics. If I'm loaded with guns and with bombs and everything, and I'm show up to the merge with an F-14, I might not react the same way as if I show up in an air-to-air equipped aircraft.
Roger. Okay, very good. Is there a divide between fighter pilots who train for different roles? For example, did ex-Superintendent pilots such as yourself struggle when getting qualified on the Rafale due to the increased responsibility in air-to-air? Conversely, did ex-Mirage pilots struggle to learn CAS in the Rafale?
Yes, but it comes down to individuals. So some guys, they're not just good at air-to-air. Some guys are not really into anti-surface tactics. So it really depends on everyone. As a superior pilot, I really was. It got on my nerve not to be able to do air-to-air. So when I arrived on Rafale, I was really excited, and I really enjoyed the air-to-air, and I did a lot of air-to-air. So it really depends on everyone. Some people like to stick to what they do best. Some people like to get outside their comfort zone. I really had a blast doing as much air-to-air as I can. And as Chuck Yeager said, the more experience you get, the better you get. So if you are not very good at air-to-air because you come from Super E and you don't put yourself in as many air-to-air missions as possible, you're not going to improve and you're not going to be doing more. I know that when I transitioned to the Rafale, I tried to do almost only air-to-air during periods of time. It's actually much more fun than doing air-to-ground. So it really depends on everyone. I ended up being instructor on every role, including air-to-air. I had the chance to have an exchange officer in my squadron when I was transitioning. He was from the Air Force and from the Mirage 2000-5. So he was air-to-air only on the Rafale. He was my chief of operation. I was his number 2, so we're doing admin together. And so I was in charge of the schedule. So I would put myself in air-to-air training conversion missions always with him. So I got the best training from the biggest specialist of the Air Force that was in his exchange tour. So that was awesome. So you can be air-to-ground guy and switch to air-to-air because you find yourself the right mentor and you like it.
Awesome. Okay, big question here. I've heard you speak in the past interviews about how the standard of 1 versus 1 BFM set is not useful for accurately representing combat, as you are not allowed to engage before the merge. Similarly, how BFM is only done above 10,000 feet hard deck, where the effectiveness and sensors and aircraft performance is different to low level. Are air forces that operate under a decentralized command structure better equipped for combat, as they might not be as strict when penalizing training rule violations such as breaking the hard deck or bubble?
Good question. 10,000 or 5,000. We can usually dogfight down to 5K, which is pretty cool. The big difference is usually below 12,000 feet. You're really going to feel a difference in how the aircraft behaves. The big difference is that military with SOPs, enforcing training rules, all that stuff. In big combat scenarios, they won't have to go to the merge. So small air forces that don't really tend to be overly standardized or stuff like that, they're gonna in the end lose due to numbers anyway. What I mean is, if you look at the U.S. militaries, they're gonna win with numbers anyway, and they apply those very rigid scenarios and rules because they train a huge number of pilots, and they can't adapt to every specific guy and every specific level, because levels are very different amongst pilots. So they just put those rules and stick within the rules, do your job, and we will win for sure. When you look at smaller militaries, you can't really do that. You're going to adapt more to every single pilot, and every single pilot might be willing to move a little bit around the comfort zone. But in the end, even if you're a super exciting pilot, one guy against 5 or 7 guys trained at 10,000 feet, you're gonna lose anyway. So I like to say, yes, you are better dogfighter when you don't have to respect those rules or without those rules for sure. But if you do that, chances are you're not going to show up with enough assets on the first day of the combat situation.
That's an interesting question. Interesting answer. Okay, so one of the first things I noticed about the Rafale is that you've got 2 sticks, which is a bit weird. Can you explain the throttle quadrant of the Rafale and the purpose of having
it's not a stick? It's a throttle, but we put it to look like a stick to confuse people and make them think we move the Canard with the left hand.
Cunning, very cunning.
Joke aside, it's just a throttle, and it's big and heavy, so that you can really use the OTAS system, so hands on stick and on throttle and stick, and you have all those buttons available. It's very stable. It's actually pretty cool. It does look weird, but it doesn't feel weird with your hand. So you have to trust the fact that putting your hand on the throttle of the Rafale is pretty easy, and just moves forward and back with a big schlong when you go in afterburner. Other than that, it's just design. It looks fancy because I'm sure they did a lot of studies around it, but it's pretty easy to put your hand on it, and you have tons of switches.
Roger. So it's ergonomics then, we'd call it. Ergonomics.
Yeah,
Roger, okay. This one here, was the side stick easy to get used to using the center stick? Bearing in mind you came from the center stick of the Super E.
A bit tricky initially. I did some pilot-induced oscillation during 2 close formation missions initially. So you have to get used to it a little bit, and you really have to get used to the lack of trim, especially coming from the Superatonner. So it was weird. It took me a couple hours to get used to it, but just like any pilot, initially you don't like it, and then when you really get accustomed to it, you ask yourself how you could live before knowing that system. So it's all about adapting. Pilots, we're all about adapting ourselves. It's just like in DCS or in video games, sometimes people tell me, oh, is it really realistic, the joystick? I don't really feel the force, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, your role as a pilot is to adapt. So if you lose an aileron, guess what? The aircraft is going to behave differently. Just don't bitch about it and adapt and do what you're supposed to do. And it's a switch in mindset. So whatever the condition, whatever the stick, I'm not going to complain. I'm just going to adapt. And that's what keeps us alive. It's all about adapting. Just like the DHL aircraft. The Airbus that took off from Baghdad, 2002-ish, I got shot by an SA-7, and then they lost all the controls, and they ended up flying the aircraft moving the throttles. So They weren't pitching because they couldn't move the stick. They're okay, so we adapt, and now we're going to move the throttles. I think it's really the mindset. So when you switch, you adapt. You don't have a choice anyway.
Roger, absolutely. Yeah, the control stick, is that like kind of F-16 pressure stick, or is it a proper movable stick?
Only 1 centimeter, so I guess it's close to the F-16.
Roger. Okay. Coming to the last. Yep, absolutely. Coming to the last official question now. Now, the question says, is DCS a really good simulator? Now, it sounds like a silly question. We can take it seriously, though. DCS is, for me, for the non-pilot, it looks cool and it feels cool, but I don't know if it actually simulates anything well, and we've even had some people that say it doesn't actually simulate things very well. Now, you've obviously used, if you like, professional simulators in your lifetime that are really designed to not look good per se, but or sell copies, but to really actually simulate the plane well. With that in mind, do we think, from your point of view, DCS is a good actual simulator, or do you think it's more along the kind of pretty video game type thing, or somewhere in the middle?
80% good simulator, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Couple stuff are off, but it's normal, like the missiles, like couple of flight model stuff, but it's minor stuff due to limited access to real information, I guess. No, it is awesome. It is much better than a Super E simulator. Graphic-wise and everything is much better than the Rafale simulator. It is really cool. It is really nice, honestly.
Roger.
In terms of flying the aircraft and filling, it is pretty cool, but bear in mind, when I fly, I sit in this chair right now, and it puts it. Sorry about the background noise. It removes a little bit the experience. What makes a professional simulator really professional is all the switches, all the cockpit, all that stuff. And if you do that for DCS, it's going to be awesome. I actually have a company with like F-18 cockpits, mock cockpits. And when you sit in those mock cockpits, you have a good position. Everything is how it should. It's just like a professional sim, honestly.
Roger. That's the end of the questions, Ate. Have you got 5 minutes just for the guys that are in the stream that may have...
I got 5 because I got a podcast in 11 minutes.
Right. Guys in the stream, including Le Crep, who is Ate's biggest fan, any questions you've accumulated you want to ask very quickly?
On the Raphael, do those? How much of a difference do those front canards make?
You've got your aircraft. You've got the Rafale, which has the for pitch control. It has the canards.
Yeah.
Let's take that now. Let's take it to an equivalent plane that does not have canards. Instead, it has the traditional F-15 stabs. What major difference do the canards make in terms of maneuverability, or are they just equivalent?
Slow speed. It's going to enable you to be more agile at slow speed. It's going to enable you to reduce your approach speed by at least 25-30 knots. It's going to give you extra lift at slow speed and extra control surfaces at slow speed, making you more agile and more stable.
Is that because they are before the wing, so they're in fresh air, if you know what I mean?
Not sure. I think it. It's gonna come into play. I'm not an engineer, but I'm also wondering in terms of center of gravity. With those aircrafts, they're unstable, so you can fly them without a computer. And I'm wondering how much it comes into play because you get extra lift vectors from the front and stuff like that. So maybe you can, from the design, put your CG even further back. Wondering. Honestly, I don't know. You invite a Deso engineer on for that.
That's fine. That's fine. Right. Ate, we'll terminate there. Just to wrap up. It's been lovely having you, and I know how ridiculously busy you are. So thank you very much for your time. Just like everyone says, you're a really nice guy, which makes a difference to me. There are some not so nice guys, so it's nice to meet one of the nice ones. And that's it, really. One day I'm going to keep trying. One day I'm going to try and grab you for a mission at some point, but I know you're busy, so we'll see whenever we get some time. And
do you have some time in next week?
I would love to do that. You know what? We've got a lovely big new campaign starting, and I would love nothing more than to have a real cool pilot in there. Everyone will just go quiet again and get.
End of next week, I'm alone at home with my new fiber connection. So
ooh, fiber connection. Ate with a fiber connection. That's wunderbar. Can't say it in French. Right. Anyway, I'm going to sign off and let you go because I know you're busy. Thank you very much, Ate, and I'll hopefully maybe see you next week for some flyings.
Pleasure. Shoot me an email.
Cheers, then. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Fly safe.